Hello, my name is Luis Garcia, and I am the creator of this painting you see on my left, which I titled Cary Grant. I'd like to go over the creative process with you, and I will start by panning around the whole painting so you can see it. Then I'm going to focus on certain sections of the painting, and you will see that I will be using a highlighter so you can see what my thought process was as I created this painting. And I hope that you enjoy this film and sit back and enjoy. Thank you. I titled this section, The Other Background. And the reason for that is, right now what you're looking at is the background that I had originally intended to use for this painting. But after I painted this background, I realized that it had someone else's face written on it. And I plan to use it for the other portrait I intend to do. And I felt Cary Grant definitely did not belong on this background, since a lot of the pastel colors that I had used, the violets, the lavenders, the teal, the greens, just to name a few, would have been lost if I had used this background. They just would not have popped as much as the background that I did use. And you can see that when you just look at the comparison of the two, the final painting alongside this background that I created, and you'll see that they just do not work. The hair. Let's discuss the hair since it is a dominant feature, especially since we're looking down upon the top of his head. And the one concern I did have when I painted the hair, in this particular picture here, you see the background for the eventual hair. My concern was that the background would not be light enough. Had it been too dark, when I added the hair, it would have just been really dark, the top of his head. And that was the only real concern I had. Otherwise, I would have had to have redone the whole thing had this background been too dark. But fortunately, I liked the way when I added the hair, the overall head looked. The hair and the head, the way it looked, it came out pretty good. So I was very content with it. Transformation from cyborg to Cary Grant. On the left, you see the first background that I had painted onto the canvas. On your right, you see the second background that was added and how it gels with the first background added. After the painting of the background, here you see the face being added to the background in various stages. In this photo, he looks like a cyborg. I will be referencing sections of this photo throughout the remainder of the film, explaining how that respective section was transitioned into the final portrait. Let's discuss the streaks that you see running throughout the canvas, whether they're blue or yellow, and how I handled them. There were three ways. I either eliminated it, I painted over it and let it bleed through to the surface, or I just kept them intact. So it varied depending on the way I wanted to treat it. Let's look at this blue streak that runs from the top of the forehead, the top of the head, across the face and down to the jaw. That's a very dominant line. And if I left it, you would have thought of it as a scar running across his face. So what I decided to do was I broke it up, first by the cheek, then by the nose, and finally down by the jaw. So that eliminated the dominance of that particular streak. And that's just one example of how I treated some of these streaks that you saw running all across the canvas. Here's another example of how I treated the streak. Through the process of elimination, you can see that it is gone in the center of the forehead. And upon closer inspection, you can also see that I allowed some of the underlaying background to bleed through to the surface. I added a nuance to the application of the red paint in the collar. When the plate chit was stamped by the die on this coin, you see that the die was not properly aligned and it stamped in an area that it should not have. If you look at this dollar bill, you see the last digit of the serial number when it was printed or imprinted, it did not properly line up with the remaining serial numbers. Let's take a look at the red collar. And I applied the same concept. You'll see that the paint overlaps the border on the left, and it goes onto the skin, an area it should not be in. And on the right, it did not properly print on the collar border, exposing the border. And I also applied this on the other side of his neck, the collar. Here you see the exposed border of the collar that should have been stamped with paint, but it's exposed. It's as if I imprinted the paint incorrectly. As well as at the top of the collar, you see a gap that should have been covered with paint, as well as the border should have also been covered. So this was a little twist that I added to the collar just to make it a little interesting. For this final section, we will be looking at the 3 borders I painted around the face. We will also discuss the 4th border, but that border is invisible because I didn't paint it. The 3 borders that you see serve as an aid in the capturing or freezing of 2 different moments of time during the creative process. The area within the border represents the period of time when the work is still unfinished. And anything outside of the border is the completed work. This includes the 4th invisible border. Everything just below the 2 eyes and the bridge of the nose are complete. Let's go over the unfinished section inside the borders. Here you see the side of the face has not been darkened to match the color outside the border. And here the neck is the same. The shade is not the same as the shade outside the border pertaining to the neck. And here, this should be filled with red paint to fill in the rest of the collar. This area here should also be filled with red paint. And here, there should be spots as well, just like the rest of the shirt. And finally, this cheek has not been painted at all. I wanted to blur the boundaries of painting a little bit. When you look at Da Vinci's St. Jerome in the Wilderness, you see an unfinished work. When you look at my painting, you see a completed painting which has a window into an intentional, incomplete section. And there you have the analysis of the Cary Grant portrait. Thank you for tuning in.